Hello everyone, for Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. Thanks for being with us today. We start in Colombia. That's where the Attorney General has asked the Supreme Court to open a criminal investigation against former President and current Senator Álvaro Uribe. Now, the prosecutor's office is accusing him of complicity in a paramilitary massacre in 1997. With the latest now, here's our correspondent, Natalia Margarita.
Prior to becoming president, Álvaro Uribe was the governor of the state of Antioquia between 1995 and 1997, a period in which the back-then local mayor, Gloria Cuartas, recalls the horror of 116 massacres that left nearly 700 dead and some 200,000 displaced.
Álvaro Uribe is responsible for the paramilitary structures. He holds responsibility in that regard. It is not possible that after all the murders, bombardments, extrajudicial killings and massacres that took place in Antioquia, the back-then governor says he had nothing to do with it.
Among those massacres is the one of 1997, when paramilitaries entered the village of El Aro, murdering 15 and burning the town to the ground. The Inter-American Court of Human Rights has already convicted the Colombian state. Now the country's prosecution has ordered an investigation into Álvaro Uribe's alleged complicity in the massacre.
The investigation against Álvaro Uribe for what happened while he was the governor of the state of Antioquia seems to come a little bit late. There were already more than enough testimonies, complaints and facts that were seriously incriminating the former governor and then President Álvaro Uribe.
Among the key evidence is the statement of Don Berna, a former paramilitary commander extradited to the United States, and who has accused Uribe of having direct knowledge of the 1997 massacre and of sympathizing with paramilitarism.
Many of what happened back during those days is rooted in Uribe's security policies. Now the already proven links between many of his close aides and members of government with paramilitaries implicates Uribe's responsibility too.
For many, the investigation into Uribe's links with paramilitarism is part of the truth and responsibilities that will have to be acknowledged during an eventual process of transitional justice. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá.
And Natalia joins us live now to talk about some other issues in Colombia. Hey there, Natalia. Thanks for your report there. To move on to some other issues in Colombia, the Congress has debated yesterday reforms needed to advance to the final peace agreement with the FARC. Can you give us some insight into what they discussed, what they may have discussed, and what any of their conclusions were?
What is basically being discussed in the Congress, Cody, is the reforms that are going to be necessary to guarantee the compliance with the peace agreement being negotiated there in Havana, and the successful implementation of those agreements once a final peace deal is reached in Havana. So we're talking here basically about two main constitutional amendments. One has to do with giving special powers to the president, but here it's important to clarify that we're talking about transitional special powers, so that the president has somehow a bigger room for maneuver in order to implement these accords. I insist that this will be just transitional powers. And the second constitutional amendment, or the second issue that is at stake here and is being debated in the Congress, has to do with the creation of a legislative commission for peace, a so-called legislative commission for peace that it's going to be in charge to discuss and approve, together with the president, all the institutional adjustments that will be necessary in order to succeed, as I said at the beginning, with the implementation of the peace agreements here in Colombia, Cody.
And Natalia, quickly on another subject, the coming regional elections are this month. 7 candidates already have been killed this year, and there are accusations of fraud in 30 municipalities. What can we expect at the polls on October 25th?
Yeah, well, the so-called electoral observation mission here in Colombia has been raising attention about not just 30, but 204 municipalities that are under risk of electoral fraud or political violence during these coming local and regional elections on the 25th of October. Basically, they have been saying that one of the crimes, the electoral crimes that they have observed the most happening in those municipalities is the so-called electoral transhumance, which has to do with people registering to vote in municipalities other than the ones where they actually live. Other thing very important to say is that these coming local and regional elections are crucial, right, for the implementation, as we were talking before, the implementation of the peace agreements. Let's remember that those who are going to be elected as governors, as local councils, or in the local assemblies are the ones that are expected to successfully implement those agreements in the regions. So definitely what is at stake with these coming elections is the successful implementation of the peace accords.
All right, Natalia Margarita reporting from Colombia. Natalia, thank you.
Back to you, Cody.
Moving on now, we go to Brazil, where the Brazilian Congress is voting today on a presidential veto to 6 bills that would increase public spending. The session had been set for Tuesday, but was postponed due to lack of quorum. It had previously been delayed last week because the opposition did not attend the debate. The discussions come in the midst of several adjustments by the government aimed at strengthening Brazil's economy while protecting its people.
It was not the PMDB who blocked the session today. It was the opposition and other parties who demanded that the President of the Senate call a vote on the political reform. That is not the PMDB's position. The PMDB was present and ready to vote.
Still in Brazil now, a prison was taken over by rioting inmates who took hostage of at least 10 other prisoners, reportedly sexual offenders, and threatened to throw them off of the prison roof. That appears to be what we're seeing there. Now, the Londrina State Penitentiary in the southern state of Paraná was taken over Tuesday morning and held throughout the day and into the evening. The rioters broke windows and set fires in the overcrowded prison as police and family members gathered to watch outside.
This past week, the United Nations High Commissioner on Human Rights, Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein, has been visiting Mexico, holding working meetings with legislators and members of the cabinet of President Enrique Peña Nieto. Now, Al Hussein comes only days after members of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights also visited Mexico and later stated that the country's amidst a human rights crisis with deep-rooted impunity, allowing for mass extrajudicial murders, forced disappearances, and routine torture. Now, Mexican human rights organizations and NGOs are applauding the visit of Al Hussein, writing him an open letter underscoring the high stats of murders, kidnappings, and other violent crimes that has gone rampant since Mexico started its so-called war on drugs since 2006. And the NGOs are also calling on the United Nations human rights body to intervene and observe what they say is the ongoing human rights crisis in the country, forming a body that would be, quote, active in public on making reports on the state of human rights in Mexico. Now, finally, it is being reported that Al Hussein's meeting with the country's Human Rights Commission in the Senate was fruitful, and that in private, the UN representative has backed an independent report made by the Inter-American Commission on the Ayotzinapa investigation that essentially says that the official line is wrought with errors and holes. Now, it is expected that Al Hussein is to give a press conference later today in the afternoon. This is Clayton Kahn reporting for Telesur here in Mexico City.
All right, Clayton Kahn there reporting obviously from Mexico on ongoing human rights concerns, a topic we have continued to cover for really a year now in Mexico. We continue on now. We go to Argentina. That's for the debate on Argentina's foreign policy and the lead up to the presidential elections later this month. It continues, and the differences are hugely antagonistic. Leo Poletti now files this report from the capital, from Buenos Aires.
Neoliberal candidate Mauricio Macri of the Cambiemos coalition says that Argentina should abandon the foreign policy which endorses Latin American integration, which he calls the Bolivarian axis, and reconnect with the world.
When Macri professes the idea that Argentina is supposedly isolated from the world, he's actually aiming to link up again in a privileged way with the US and the EU, turning his back on the BRICS bloc, and also, and this is most worrying for Latin America, turning his back on the region.
On the other hand, Daniel Scioli of the ruling Front for Victory coalition has ratified that it will continue to build on the foundations laid since the late Nestor Kirchner took office in 2003 and the two Cristina Fernandez administrations that followed, with the strengthening of regional integration through multilateral organizations such as UNASUR and CELAC.
Perhaps with some slight variation, maybe the rhetoric will not be as strong as in the case of Cristina, but I don't see Mr. Scioli redefining in an anti-UNASUR sense or an anti-CELAC sense the foreign policy of Argentina.
Outgoing Foreign Affairs Minister Hector Timerman says that whoever is sworn into office come December should carry on with the current foreign policy that not only promotes trade, but also endorses human and social rights and the peaceful resolution of conflicts.
For instance, in terms of cooperation, Argentina does not see cooperation as a means of domination over less developed nations. It sees as something truly cooperative, in which a country can offer to another without asking for anything in return. The practice of saying, I'm here for you, but on the condition that you're obliged to accept a loan from my country, or that you must vote on how I say in the UN General Assembly, must come to an end.
While Argentina's right wing says that Argentina should reconnect with the world, reality demonstrates that this argument is unsustainable, with Argentina a very active member in groupings such as the G77 plus China, the G20, having also received overwhelming support in its struggle against vulture funds at the UN. Leo Politicoluti, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
The president of Venezuela has announced the capture of 3 paramilitary members linked to several murders. Now, the crimes allegedly occurred in the Venezuelan state of Táchira on the Colombian border. In his TV show, In Contact with Maduro, the president said the detainees belong to the paramilitary band Los Urabeños. Now, Maduro asked that Colombia authorities deport the group's leader.
Venezuela's Attorney General officially informed me that it will ask to interrogate and to extradite Karenina to Venezuela, since he is responsible for the disappearing, torture, and dismemberment of dozens of youth in Táchira state. We captured 3 of his lieutenants, and they are saying everything. I'm only telling you that. They're saying everything related to Julio César Vélez Trillos, Julito Vélez.
Están cantando la traviata. Vinculados a Julio.
As critical parliamentary elections approach here in Venezuela, Maduro claims that an international campaign is underway to discredit Venezuela's electoral process.
Nuestro pueblo sabe lo que tiene en el corazón.
Our people know what's in the heart, and we know how to do our work.
Hacer nuestro trabajo también. Pero el objetivo es internacional.
But their goal is international. It's not just Venezuela. Their goal is Washington, Madrid, London, Brussels. Their goal is to create an international coalition against Venezuela.
El objetivo es armar una coalición internacional para venirse sobre Venezuela diciendo fraude.
Meanwhile, in preparation for the elections, the country's electoral commission will carry out a rehearsal election next week.
We invite all Venezuelans, like we will be doing during these next days and next week, to participate next October 18th in this national drill.
We turn now to Central America. We now know that at least 170 people have died after Thursday's tragic mudslide in El Cambray, Guatemala. Gerardo Torres now is joining us live for the latest as Guatemalans continue to mourn what is a horrible, horrible tragedy there. Gerardo, thanks for the latest. The last time we talked yesterday, we knew that 161 people had died, and now that number is much higher. Considering that hundreds still remain missing, do we really have any idea how high that number will go?
Well, hello, Cody. Guatemala, the expectations of still finding people alive are very low. We said yesterday was like that.
The last day, which the rescuers said that there were possibilities to still find people under the mud alive. We're talking about more than 170 people that have been found dead. There are still 300 missing. The operation of rescue and taking out the mud have decreased its velocity because now, they are very close to where the houses were, and maybe there could be find dead bodies or other things that they have to have a more delicate treatment. We're talking about that in the last days, more than 12,000
tons of mud were taken out after the landslide, and many houses that were destroyed. People were inside of them. There are still 300 people missing. The Guatemala government has assured that they will continue until they find all the bodies, but they have been very sincere that they have really slow expectations of still finding people alive.
All right, Gerardo, we're having a little bit of trouble there hearing what you're saying, but we did catch sort of the gist of it there. Gerardo Torres reporting on that tragedy in Guatemala. Gerardo, thanks. And we move on now. We stay in Central America, but we go to Nicaragua. That's where clashes between police and protesting miners ended Tuesday with a police officer dead and 23 people injured. 8 civilians were also wounded. Protesters attacked the police with sticks, rocks, mortars, and Molotov cocktails. Now, the El Limon mine is owned by Canada's B2 Gold and has been closed for over a week. The police station, a police vehicle, a company bus, and 3 company vehicles were also destroyed in the attack. Back to South America, the Ecuadorian state-owned oil company Petroecuador announced it will cut 300 jobs in an effort to counter slow growth amid an oil slump. Its general manager says the company is ready to buy light crude from foreign suppliers for the first time in decades. Ecuador has always been an oil exporter, but is now suffering from low oil prices, reducing its dollar revenue. GDP is expected to grow just 0.4% this year, down from 3.8% in 2014. The Doctors Without Borders NGO is demanding a probe into the U.S. bombing of their facility in Afghanistan, and they are specific with those demands. We'll have the details when we come back.
Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Rod stars G1 and Claudia de la Cruz are Rebel Diaz, hip-hop activists positioned within a history of political resistance through music. And you don't stop. They invite young people to express themselves about their social struggles. And you don't stop. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there. Caracas, Havana, Mexico, Quito, Washington, wherever the newsmakers will be there. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there. Russia has launched rocket strikes on targets of the self-named Islamic State, or Daesh, in Syria from its warships in the Caspian Sea. Now, according to Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, 11 targets were destroyed after 26 missiles were deployed from the ships, which are anchored nearly 1,000 miles away. The minister says that there was no damage to civilian installations. Meanwhile, Russian officials say Syrian ground troops have launched an offensive under Russian air cover. Both Russian and Turkish officials have continued consultations over the claims that Russian Air Force units violated Turkish airspace on October 3rd. Meetings were attended by Ministry of Defense officials in order to find a way to avoid a repeat of the incident or similar ones in the future. The MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, does not trust internal military inquiries into the U.S. bombing of their hospital that killed at least 22 people last Saturday in Afghanistan. Now, as a result of that distrust, they are seeking to invoke the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission to investigate the incident. The IHFFC was set up under the Geneva Conventions in 1991, but has never actually been used. The MSF says the bombing could not have been a mistake, as the coordinates of the hospital were well known to both the U.S. and Afghan authorities.
If we let this go, as if it was a non-event, we're basically giving a blank check to any countries who are at war in conflict and telling them, you know what, you can do whatever because actually nothing, is happening. You're not being, accountable for anything. So it's very important that somehow, there's some clarity about what happened, and that as a community, we reaffirm that we are upholding to the Geneva Convention. Otherwise, as a humanitarian aid actor, it won't be possible to continue to work.
And the violence keeps rising in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem. Today, an 18-year-old Palestinian girl has been killed by Israeli forces who accused her of attacking a settler. However, the witness's version is otherwise. Noor Harazin now with more of the details.
The situation in the West Bank continued to escalate. Palestinian medical sources reported that the number of Palestinian people injured only in the past 24 hours is up to over 130 people, some of them with live bullets, some of them with tear gas bombs. At the same time, Israeli media reported that they killed a Palestinian girl after she stabbed an Israeli settler. However, Palestinian eyewitnesses who were around the scene said that the Israeli settler tried to attack the girl and remove her hijab, her headscarf, and when she refused and pushed him, he shot her with a gun that was with him. So all of these Israeli attacks on Palestinians and also Palestinian resistance attacks on Israeli settlers are escalating the situation in the West Bank from bad to worse, and the Palestinian youth in Gaza and in the West Bank have declared it as a third intifada.
The president of Israel, whose role is mostly ceremonial, seems to have taken a softer line on the Al-Aqsa compound that has been causing tensions between Palestinians and Israelis.
We hear again and again lies about Israel's intention toward the holy mountain, holy to Jews and Muslims. Let me be very clear. Israel has no intention whatsoever to change the status quo. But this status quo, this important understanding, needs two sides to keep it.
A lavish opening ceremony was held in South Korea for the President's Cup. Now, the President's Cup is played every 2 years by the United States and a team of international players, minus teams from Europe. The golf tournament kicks off on Thursday and continues until Sunday.
Now,
walls in Ukraine's capital, Kiev, are filling with colorful works of art, reflecting a new mood of optimism in a city once crisscrossed by barricades. Ukrainian and international urban artists are creating